Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about comparing fractions using models. So, first of all, let's talk about what is a fraction. Well, a fraction is when you divide a whole into equal parts. It's when we take the number 1 and split it up into a bunch of equal pieces. We did that yesterday on our number line where we counted out the number of spaces it took to get from 0 to 1. That was our denominator. And then we were looking at where the dot was on a certain point to figure out what our numerator was. So today we're also going to be reviewing that briefly, but then we're going to get into comparing fractions, which is so fun because you actually get to see pictures of them. So first of all, let's go over what our numerator and denominator is. Let's practice saying numerator together a couple of times. I want you to get your hands out and clap out the syllables with me because it's easier to say it that way. Here we go. Numerator. Good. Let's try it one more time. Numerator. Very good. You're getting so much better at it. So a numerator is our top number, and we know it's our top number because the N in numerator stands for north, and the direction north points up. So our numerator is north, and that is our part. That is how many pieces are colored in, or how many pieces are shaded in, how many pieces are missing, whatever your question is asking you to find, that part is going to be your numerator. Next, we have our denominator. Let's practice saying denominator together. Denominator. Good. Let's try it one more time. Denominator. Excellent. So our denominator is our bottom number. And I know that it goes below the fraction bar because D in denominator stands for down. And down below the fraction bar is where the denominator lives. So we have our numerator and our denominator. Our denominator is our total. How many pieces total is our whole being divided into? So we have to count all of the pieces, all of the colored and uncolored pieces, or all of the shaded and unshaded pieces in your fraction is what your denominator is going to be. Let's talk about the differences between splitting up a fraction into more pieces. So here we have our whole, and if I divide it into two sections into halves, that's not so bad because I still get a large amount of watermelon. But if I start to split it between more people, like 4 people, all of a sudden, my piece of watermelon gets smaller and smaller and smaller. That is because the larger your denominator is, the bottom number, the more pieces you have to divide it into. And the more pieces you divide that whole into, the smaller those pieces get. So I know that if I wanted to share my watermelon with 8 people, I'm going to get a little tiny piece. It's better for me if I just either eat the whole thing by myself or if I split it between just one other person. That's because the pieces of that fraction are going to be much larger. And I love watermelon, so I want as much watermelon as possible. Next, let's talk about what a proper fraction is. A proper fraction follows the rules. The rule is that the numerator on top is smaller than the denominator on the bottom. It means that you don't run out of space to color in on the fraction. It's a very easy way to deal with fractions. Proper fractions are very easy. That's what we've been dealing with up to this point. We're going to get more into improper fractions and whole numbers next time. And we've talked briefly about whole numbers. Whole numbers is when the whole thing is colored in. So you have the same number on top and the bottom because that means the whole part of the fraction is colored in. Proper fractions are anything less than that. So when you have a fraction that has any pieces less than that colored in, that is a proper fraction. A proper fraction is less than one whole. A improper fraction is going to be bigger than a whole, so it's going to be bigger than the number 1. Next, we're going to talk about what we do when we add and subtract fractions. So when we're adding and subtracting fractions, we are looking at 2 fractions that have the same denominator. In 3rd grade, you don't have to worry about making sure that they have the same denominator. They are already going to have the same denominator. Next year in 4th grade, you're going to have to figure out how to add fractions that have different denominators, and that's a whole other story. But for now, we have it pretty easy because all we have to do is add the numerators together. Our numerator is our top number. What we're adding together here is how many pieces are shaded in. Okay, we are not worrying about adding our denominators together because our fractions are actually just going to continue to be divided into fourths, including in our answer. So we're adding our top numbers here. 2 plus 1. I have 2 shaded in here, 1 shaded in here, and that means that altogether I'm going to have 3 shaded in out of 4. 4 is my denominator because there are 4 sections in each fraction there. So I had 2 out of 4 colored in here, 2/4. I had 1 out of 4 or 1/4 colored in here. If I combine those 2 fractions together, the shaded in parts, I now have 3 colored in, but guess what? The fraction is still divided into fourths. I'm not changing how I'm cutting up the fraction. I'm changing how many pieces I'm coloring in, okay? We're changing how many pieces are shaded in or colored in, and that would be 3/4. So that's how we would get our answer there for that. So same thing for subtracting fractions. You leave the denominator the same as long as they're all equal, and then you just add or subtract the top, the numerators. It's really easy in 3rd grade, okay? So let's look at fractions on a number line. So when we have a fraction on a number line, it's in between the numbers 0 and 1. So we have 0 over here and 1 over here. 1 is going to be our whole. That means the whole fraction has been colored in. First of all, we have to figure out our denominator, which is how many sections 1 has been divided into. So on our number line here, we have 1 section, we have 2 sections, and we have 3 sections. So I know that altogether, this fraction is being split into 3 parts. 3 parts is said thirds, so it's split into thirds. So my bottom number for all of those is going to be 3. Next, we look at the tick marks, and we count the spaces up to figure out our fraction. So this one has 1 space colored in, so this tick mark is going to be 1/3. This tick mark has 2 shaded in, so it's going to be 2/3. And the last one has all 3 colored in, which is 3/3. That is the same thing as 1 whole because the whole thing would be colored in. Now we're going to look at our orange point, and our orange point is located right here. So I know that that orange point is showing 1/3 because 1/3 of the number line is colored in. That is how I know to find a fraction on a number line. You count the total amount of spaces it's divided into first. That's your bottom number for all of the tick marks. Next, you count the spaces, not the tick marks, the spaces, and you figure out how many spaces it takes to get to whatever point is on your number line, and that's going to be your numerator. So here it took 1 section, so 1's my top number, 1/3, and it was out of 3 sections altogether, and that's how I got 3 on the bottom. Next, we are finally getting into comparing fractions using models. Okay, so when I say using models, I just mean using pictures. We have 2 fractions here, and if you notice, I want you to pay close attention because this fraction and the other fraction are divided into the same amount of parts. So obviously, we have 8 parts here and 8 parts on our other fraction. So that is where we got our denominator here. We have 8 here and 8 here because both fractions are divided into 8 pieces. This makes it very easy to compare fractions. When they have the same bottom number, the same denominator, all you have to do is figure out which one has more parts shaded in because they're divided into equal parts. So I know that I'm looking at the same amount of parts in each fraction. So I'm just going to look for the one that has the most colored in. Okay, here this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colored in, and this one has 1 colored in. So obviously the gator is going to eat the greater number. The greater fraction here would be 5/8. Okay, we're going to talk about also cross multiplying in just a second. Cross multiplying is it's like our butterfly method. It's a butterfly multiplying, and it is a good way to check to make sure you compare your fractions right. The way you do that is you write the fraction above your picture, and then you write the fraction above your second picture. You draw an arrow from the 8 to the 1, so it's going up, okay? It's going up like an X. It's going to make an X just like a multiplication sign. So you're going to do 8 times 1, which is 8, and you just write that right above that, and then you do 8 times 5, and you shoot it up to the next part of this fraction, 8 times 5, which is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and you would write 40 above this fraction. Now, whichever number is bigger, you're not even looking at the fractions anymore. You're looking at which number is bigger. Well, 40 is bigger than 8, so 40 is your bigger fraction, okay? This has much more space colored in than this one. Obviously, you can look at the picture here and see this has a lot more space colored in than this one. This one's a very easy picture to look at and make sure that it is correct. But in a minute, you're going to see one that's really close, and cross multiplying is the only way to figure out which one is greater. So next we have 1/3 and 2/3. So with 1/3 and 2/3, obviously these are both split into thirds as well. So we can see very easily which one has more colored in because they are broken up into the same amount of parts. Let's just make sure, let's double check by cross multiplying to make sure we know which one the gator's going to eat. I want you to think, which one do you think has more space colored in? The blue or the yellow fraction? 1/3 or 2/3? Okay, now that you have that in your head, let's cross multiply and make sure. So for cross multiplying, we're going to draw an arrow from 3 to 2. We're multiplying the bottom number by the top number over here, and 3 times 2, 3 doubled, or skip count by 3 times. 2, 4, 6 gives us 6 over here. And then if you multiply 3 times 1, remember we're making an x, 3 times 1 is 3. So I know that I'm comparing these numbers. I know that 6 is bigger than 3, so this is the bigger fraction, okay? All right, now, this is what I wanted to show you about because these fractions are very close. And if you look at these two fractions, they don't have the same bottom number. They have different bottom numbers and different top numbers. And it is very hard to compare numbers that do not have the same amount of spaces divided into them. Because you might look at this and say, oh, well, Miss Weaver, this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces colored in, and this one only has 2 pieces colored in. But you can't compare those pieces because they are not the same size. It doesn't matter if this one has 5 colored in and this one has 2 colored in because they have different denominators. This fraction, the purple fraction, is divided into 8 parts, so the parts are much smaller. The yellow fraction is divided into 3 parts, so the parts are much larger. So it's not really fair to count up the number and just go off of that. You can't do it that way unless the bottom number is the same on both sides, okay? This fraction, though, these fractions are not the same on both sides. And I am glitching. Wow. I don't know what's happening. Okay, I think we're good. So what we're going to do is we're going to cross multiply to figure this out. So first we're going to draw an arrow from 8 to 2. We go from the bottom number to the top number of the next fraction, and we're going to do 8 times 2. 8 times 2 is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So 16 is going to be the number for this fraction. And then we're going to do the same thing by doing 3 times 5. I can skip count by 5s 3 times. 5, 10, 15. Do you see how close these numbers are? But one is clearly larger than the other. Which one is bigger? 16. You would have not known that 2/3 is bigger than 5/8 just by looking at those pictures. Those pictures are tricky. You cross multiply. I want you to cross multiply every single time to make sure that you got your answer right. Because you might be looking at that and be thinking, oh, but this one has 5 colored in, so this one's got to be right. Don't rush it. You don't have to rush your answer. Slow down, do the work, and get the right answer the first time, okay? So let's look at this picture. This one is pretty obvious because we have a lot more blue than yellow. So we know that 2/4 is probably going to be larger. We're going to cross multiply anyway just to make sure. So we have 4 times 1, which is going to give me 4. Anything times 1 equals the other number. And then we have 8 times 2. 8 times 2 is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So 16 is going to be my number for this fraction. Which one is larger? Obviously 16, so the gator is going to eat this fraction. All right, we have one more. So we have 6/8 and 1/3 here. And I know that if you were just looking at the numbers, you might just be like, 6/8 has got to be bigger because those are both bigger numbers than 1/3. And part of that would be true, but also you have to keep in mind that the bottom number is different on both of these fractions. So just to make sure, we're going to cross multiply to make sure that we have the right answer. So here we're going to do 8 times 1. 8 times 1 is 8. And then we're going to do 3 times 6. I'm going to skip count by 3s 6 times. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. So 18 is going to be my answer over here. Obviously, 18 is larger than 8, so the gator is going to eat this fraction. So when you are comparing fractions, sometimes the picture will tell you which one has more shaded in. And when I say more shaded in, I don't mean more parts shaded in. I mean the section as a whole. So I mean like all of this, like this has much more green than blue. You're looking at the colored in sections, not just saying, oh, well, this one has 6 colored in and this one has 1. That doesn't always work. You have to actually look, use your eyes and look and see which one has the most space colored in. And if you cannot tell right off the bat like that, then you need to cross multiply just to double check yourself. It's good to cross multiply every time just to make sure that you understand what you're doing, okay? Make sure that you understand which fraction is larger and which one is smaller. I hope this video helped you guys. Let me know if you need any help at all. Good luck. Bye.